Sedna the Sea Goddess, retold by Helen Caswell. For food, for materials to make clothes and to build shelters, and for fuel to create heat and light, the people of the Arctic turned to the animals of the sea. Here's how those sea creatures came to the icy waters of the far north. The petrels, proud birds that they are, live on the highest parts of the cliffs. From their peaks they swirl out like snowflakes, looking down on the rolling noisiness of razorbills, who build their nests halfway up, and the gulls and the little kittiwakes, who are content to nest at the bottom. Once, long, long ago, there was a petrel who was so proud that he could find no mate that pleased him among his own kind, so he decided he would marry a human being. With a little magic, the petrel gave himself a human form. Then, wanting to look his best, he got some fine sealskins and made a beautiful parka. Now he looked very handsome, but his eyes were still the eyes of a bird, so he made some spectacles from thin pieces of walrus tusk. These spectacles had only narrow slits to look through and hid the petrel's eyes completely. In this disguise, he went out in his kayak to find a wife. In a skin-covered tent beside the sea, there lived a beautiful girl named Sedna, who had many brothers but no sisters, and her father was a widower. Many men had come to her to ask her to marry them, men from her own tribe and other tribes, but Sedna refused to marry. She was as proud in her way as the petrel, and could find no man who pleased her. Then the petrel came, appearing as a handsome stranger in a beautiful sealskin parka. Instead of bringing his kayak up onto the beach, he stayed in it at the edge of the surf and called out to Sedna to come to him. This interested Sedna, as no other suitor had done such a thing, but she would not go to him. Then he began to sing to her, "Come to me, come into the land of the birds, where there is never hunger, where my tent is made of beautiful skins. You will have a necklace of ivory and sleep on the skins of bears. Your lamps will always be filled with oil, and your pot with meat." The song was so beautiful that Sedna could not refuse. She packed her belongings in a bag, she stepped out of the tent, and she walked down across the beach and got into the stranger's kayak. They sailed out over the sea, away from Sedna's home and her father and brothers. The petrel made a home for Sedna on the rocky cliff. Every day he caught fish for her, telling her that they were young seals, and for a while Sedna was happy, because the petrel had enchanted her. But one day the petrel's spectacles fell off, and for the first time Sedna looked into her husband's eyes. In the moment the spell was broken. She realized all at once that she was married to a bird, and she saw that her home was a nest on a barren cliff. For the first time she felt the sting of the sea spray and the lashing winds. Sedna wept with grief and despair, and the petrel, although he loved her, could not console her. In the meantime, Sedna's father and brothers had grown more and more lonely, with no woman to cook their meat and sew their clothing and keep the oil burning in their lamps. They set out in their boat in the direction that the stranger had taken Sedna. When they came to the cliff where Sedna lived, the petrel was away hunting, and Sedna was alone. When she saw her family, she went running down to them, weeping, and in a rush told them all that had happened to her. Her brothers immediately lifted her into the boat, and they began paddling as rapidly as possible back toward their own coast. They had not been gone long when the petrel returned to the nest. He looked everywhere for Sedna, and he called for her, his cry a long and lonely sound that was lost in the wind and the sound of the sea. Other petrels answered him. They told him where Sedna had gone. Spreading his wings, he soared out over the sea and was soon flying over the boat that was carrying Sedna back to her home. This made the brothers nervous, and they paddled faster. As they skimmed over the water, the petrel became angry. He began to beat his wings against the wind, making it whirl and shriek, and making the waves leap higher and higher. In minutes, the sea was black with storm, and the waves so wild that the boat was in danger of turning over. Then Sedna's brothers and father realized that the petrel was such a powerful spirit that even the sea was angry because his bride was being taken from him. They decided that they must sacrifice Sedna to the sea in order to save their own lives. They picked her up and threw her into the icy water. Sedna, blue with cold, came to the surface and grabbed at the side of the boat with her fingers that were turning to ice. Her brothers, out of their minds with fear, hit at her hands with a paddle, and her fingertips broke off like icicles and fell back into the sea, where they turned into seals and swam away. Coming up again, Sedna tried once more to catch hold of the boat, and again her brothers hit at her hands with the paddle. The second joints of her fingers broke off and fell into the water, turning into ojuk, into ground seals. 2 more times Sedna tried to make hold of the side of the boat, and each time her terrified brothers hit her hands, and the third joints of her fingers turned into walrus, and the thumbs became whales. Then Sedna sank to the bottom of the sea. The storm died down, and the brothers finally brought their boat to land, but a great wave followed them and drowned them all. Sedna became a powerful spirit and in control of the sea creatures who sprang from her fingers. Sometimes she sends storms and wrecks kayaks. The people fear her and hold ceremonies in her honor, and on especially serious occasions, as when she causes famines by keeping the seals from being caught by the hunters, the Angakok, the conjurer, goes on a spirit journey to Sedna's home at the bottom of the sea to arrange her hair. Sedna wears her hair in 2 braids, each as thick as an arm, but since she has no fingers, she cannot plait her own hair, and this is the service she appreciates most of all. So when the Angakok comes to her and arranges her hair for her, she is so grateful that she sends some of the seals and other animals to the hunters so that they may have food.